August 14, 1963. Damascus, Syria. The temperature climbs past 105 degrees Fahrenheit as the afternoon sun turns the ancient city into a furnace. In a cramped apartment overlooking the Barada River, Dr. James Whitmore stands frozen in the doorway, his heart hammering against his ribs. On the wooden desk before him, illuminated by a shaft of merciless sunlight, lies a Minox camera no larger than a cigarette lighter. Beside it, spread like evidence at a crime scene, are three of his classified consulate access reports, documents he should never have brought home, documents that detail CIA intelligence assessments of Israeli nuclear activities at a facility called Dimona. And there, reflected in the small mirror mounted on the apartment wall, he sees her, Yasmin Al-Rashid, the woman he has loved for 2 years, the woman whose laugh sounds like wind chimes in the desert night, the woman whose fingers have traced ancient cuneiform tablets with the same tenderness she once traced the lines of his face. She stands in the bedroom doorway, her dark eyes meeting his in the mirror, and in that suspended moment between discovery and confession, James Whitmore understands that everything he thought he knew about his life has been a carefully constructed lie. The archaeological digs, the late-night discussions about Mesopotamian trade routes, the whispered promises in Arabic and English, all of it, every tender moment, every shared discovery, has been part of an espionage operation so sophisticated that he never saw it coming. And now, as Ba'athist security forces tighten their grip on Damascus, and the entire Middle East slides toward a war that will reshape the region, James must make a choice that will haunt him for the rest of his life. But to understand how an American archaeologist and a Syrian research assistant arrived at this moment of betrayal, we must go back to where it all began, to a dusty excavation site outside Palmyra, where two people met over the fragments of a civilization that had been dead for 3,000 years, and where the seeds of a modern tragedy were planted in ancient soil. 26 months earlier, June 1961, the desert outside Palmyra shimmers in the heat as James Whitmore kneels in a carefully gridded excavation trench, brushing sand from what appears to be a fragment of a clay tablet. At 32 years old, James has already made a name for himself in Near Eastern archaeology circles. His doctoral dissertation on Assyrian administrative systems earned him a position at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, and his current project, funded by a combination of academic grants and discrete State Department money, focuses on trade networks in the ancient Syrian desert. What most of his colleagues do not know is that James also serves as a part-time consultant for the American consulate in Damascus, providing cultural context and local insights that help American diplomats navigate the treacherous political landscape of post-colonial Syria. It is a role he has always considered minor, almost incidental to his real work of recovering the past. He has no idea that this dual identity will soon make him a target. A shadow falls across his trench. James looks up, squinting against the brutal sun, and sees a young woman standing at the edge of the excavation. She wears practical field clothes, khaki pants and a loose cotton shirt, with a scarf protecting her neck from the sun. Her face is partially obscured by sunglasses, but he can see the sharp intelligence in her features, the way she studies the excavation with the focused attention of someone who knows what she is looking at. She speaks in Arabic first, then switches to flawless English when she sees his momentary hesitation. "My name is Yasmin Al-Rashid. I understand you are looking for a research assistant who knows the local context and can help with translation work." James stands, brushing dust from his knees. He has indeed been looking for someone, preferably a Syrian national who can help him navigate the complex permissions required for archaeological work in a country where the government views foreign researchers with suspicion. But he did not expect someone like this, someone whose credentials, as she begins to outline them, are almost too perfect. A master's degree in archaeology from Damascus University. 2 years working with a French expedition at Mari. Fluent in Arabic, English, and French, with reading knowledge of Akkadian and Sumerian. And she adds with a slight smile family connections in the Ministry of Culture that could smooth the way for permit renewals. James hires her on the spot. It is a decision that will change everything. For the first 3 months, their relationship remains strictly professional. Yasmin proves to be everything she claimed and more. She has an intuitive understanding of stratigraphy, an eye for subtle patterns in artifact distribution, and a gift for managing the local workers with a combination of firmness and respect that James, for all his academic training, has never quite mastered. She arrives at the site before dawn and often stays until the last light fades from the western sky. She takes meticulous notes, photographs every significant find, and asks questions that reveal a mind constantly making connections between the ancient past and the present. In the evenings, after the workers have gone home and the desert begins to cool, James and Yasmin sit in the expedition tent, drinking sweet tea and discussing the day's discoveries. It is during these conversations that James begins to see beyond the professional competence to the person underneath. Yasmin speaks about growing up in Damascus, about a childhood spent exploring the old city with her grandfather, a scholar of Islamic history who taught her to see the layers of time embedded in every stone and street. She talks about the political upheavals that have shaken Syria since independence, the coups and counter-coups, the rise of competing visions for the nation's future. She speaks with passion about the need to preserve Syria's archaeological heritage, not as a relic of dead civilizations, but as a living connection to an identity that transcends the artificial borders drawn by colonial powers. James finds himself drawn to her intensity, her refusal to separate the past from the present, her belief that archaeology is not an escape from politics, but a way of understanding the deeper currents that shape human societies. He begins to share more of his own story, his childhood in rural Pennsylvania, his father's death when James was 12, the scholarship to Princeton that opened a world he had never imagined existed. He talks about the first time he held a cuneiform tablet in his hands at a museum in Philadelphia, the electric thrill of touching something created by human hands 4,000 years ago, the realization that the past was not dead, but simply waiting to be read. He does not tell her about his work for the consulate. That remains a separate compartment of his life, something he does once or twice a month when he travels to Damascus to file reports and attend briefings. It seems unimportant compared to the real work of excavation and discovery. It is in late September, as the worst of the summer heat begins to fade, that their relationship shifts. They are working late at the site, photographing a particularly fine cylinder seal that one of the workers discovered that afternoon. The sun has set, and they are using portable lamps that cast harsh shadows across the trench walls. Yasmin is holding the seal, turning it slowly so James can capture every angle with the camera when her hand slips. The seal, a piece of carved stone that has survived 3 millennia, falls toward the rocky ground. James lunges forward, catching it inches from disaster. The momentum carries him into Yasmin, and suddenly they are standing very close, his hands cupping hers, the seal pressed between their palms, their faces inches apart in the lamplight. For a long moment neither moves. Then Yasmin says softly in Arabic, "Thank you for catching it." James realizes he is still holding her hands. He should step back, restore the professional distance, but he does not. Instead, he says, also in Arabic, though his accent is terrible, "I would not want to lose something so valuable." She looks at him, and he sees something in her eyes that makes his breath catch. "Are we still talking about the seal?" She asks. "No," he admits, "we are not." She kisses him then, a brief touch of lips that sends electricity through his entire body. When she pulls back, she is smiling, but there is something complicated in her expression, something he cannot quite read. "This is probably a mistake," she says. "Probably," he agrees. But he kisses her again anyway, and in that moment, surrounded by the fragments of ancient civilizations and the vast darkness of the desert night, James Whitmore begins to fall in love with a woman who is not who she claims to be. Over the following months, James and Yasmin construct a relationship that exists in the spaces between their public and private lives. At the excavation site, they maintain professional boundaries, though the workers certainly notice the way they look at each other, the small touches that linger a moment too long. But in Damascus, where James maintains a small apartment near the old city, they create a different world. Yasmin begins staying over several nights a week, and the apartment fills with the artifacts of their shared life. Books in English and Arabic stacked on every surface. Photographs of excavation finds pinned to the walls. A phonograph that plays Farah's and Kulthum alongside Miles Davis and John Coltrane. They cook together, attempting to combine American and Syrian cuisines with varying degrees of success. They make love with the windows open, letting the sounds of Damascus drift in, the call to prayer, and the clatter of street vendors, and the distant rumble of military vehicles. James has never been happier. He tells himself that he has found something rare, a partner who understands both his professional passion and his personal needs, someone who can move between worlds as easily as he does. What he does not know is that Yasmin has been reporting on him since the day they met. She is not merely a research assistant. She is an agent of the Egyptian Mukhabarat, Egyptian intelligence, recruited during her time at university and trained in the arts of human intelligence collection. Her mission, assigned by her handlers in Cairo, is to get close to James Whitmore, to exploit his access to the American consulate, and to gather intelligence on American and Israeli activities in the region. Egypt, under Gamal Abdel Nasser, is locked in a bitter rivalry with Israel and views any Israeli military development, particularly in the nuclear realm, as an existential threat. The Dimona facility in the Negev desert, where Israel is secretly developing nuclear capabilities with French assistance, has become an obsession for Egyptian intelligence. The Americans know about Dimona. They know the Israelis are lying about it being a textile factory, and Egyptian intelligence desperately wants to know what the CIA really understands about Israeli nuclear progress. Yasmin's assignment is to find out, and James Whitmore, with his consulate access and his trusting nature, is the perfect target. But something has gone wrong with Yasmin's operation, something her handlers in Cairo did not anticipate, and something she herself did not expect. She has fallen in love with her target. It begins as a professional complication, an emotional entanglement that makes her reports to Cairo less frequent and more guarded. But as the months pass, as she and James build a life together in the margins of their respective deceptions, Yasmin finds herself caught between two irreconcilable loyalties. She believes in the cause that recruited her, the dream of Arab unity and resistance to Israeli expansion that Nasser represents. She remembers the stories her uncle told about being driven from his village in Palestine in 1948, about watching his home burn as Jewish forces advanced. She carries the weight of that displacement, that historical wound, and she genuinely believes that gathering intelligence on Israeli nuclear development is not just a job but a moral imperative. But she also loves James. She loves his earnestness, his passion for ancient civilizations, his American optimism that believes problems can be solved through understanding and goodwill. She loves the way he listens when she talks, really listens, as if her words matter more than anything else in the world. She loves waking up next to him in the Damascus apartment, watching the early morning light paint patterns on the walls, feeling safe in a way she has not felt since childhood. And so Yasmin begins to operate in a space of profound moral ambiguity, feeding Cairo enough information to maintain her cover, while trying to protect James from the full consequences of her betrayal. She photographs documents, but only certain ones. She reports on his consulate visits, but leaves out details that might put him in danger. She tells herself that she is balancing her duties, serving her cause while protecting the man she loves. She does not yet understand that in the world of espionage, such balances are impossible to maintain. The crisis begins in March 1963, when a Ba'athist military coup overthrows the Syrian government and installs a new regime deeply suspicious of both American and Egyptian influence. The new government begins a brutal crackdown on suspected foreign agents and local collaborators. Paranoia sweeps through Damascus as the Mukhabarat, the Syrian intelligence service, arrests hundreds of people on charges of espionage. Yasmin's Egyptian handlers, fearing that their networks in Syria will be rolled up, send her urgent instructions. They need hard intelligence on Dimona, and they need it now, before the political situation deteriorates further. They tell her to push harder, to take more risks, to exploit James's access more aggressively. And they send her the Minox camera, a piece of spy equipment that represents a point of no return. Using the camera means crossing a line from casual information gathering to serious espionage. It means photographing classified documents, creating physical evidence that could destroy both her and James if discovered. Yasmin hesitates. She knows that what Cairo is asking could get James arrested, could end his career, could possibly get him killed. But she also knows that refusing her handler's orders will mark her as unreliable, will possibly expose her to Syrian security forces who are now hunting for Egyptian agents. And there is something else, something she barely admits to herself. Part of her wants to complete the mission, wants to prove that her love for James has not compromised her commitment to the cause. She wants to believe that she can be both a loyal agent and a loving partner, that she can serve her people while protecting her heart. It is a delusion that will cost her everything. In early August, James brings home 3 classified reports from the consulate. He should not do this. It violates every security protocol. But he has been working on a comprehensive analysis of regional tensions, and he wants to refine his arguments in the quiet of his apartment rather than in the sterile environment of the consulate's secure reading room. The reports contain CIA assessments of Israeli nuclear development at Dimona, including estimates of when Israel might achieve weapons capability and analyses of how this development could destabilize the regional balance of power. They are exactly what Cairo has been demanding. Yasmin waits until James is asleep, then carefully removes the reports from his briefcase. Her hands shake as she sets up the Minox camera, as she photographs each page under the desk lamp, trying to keep the camera steady while her heart pounds so hard she fears it will wake him. She tells herself this is the last time, that after this she will find a way to extract herself from the operation, to build a life with James that is not founded on lies. She does not know that she has already been betrayed. Syrian intelligence, working with increased efficiency under the new Ba'athist regime, has been monitoring Egyptian intelligence activities in Damascus. They have identified several Egyptian agents, and through a combination of surveillance and informant reports, they have connected Yasmin to the Egyptian network. They do not yet have enough evidence to arrest her, but they are watching, waiting for her to make a move that will give them the proof they need. And they are very interested in her relationship with the American archaeologist who has access to the consulate. On the morning of August 14th, James wakes early, disturbed by a dream he cannot quite remember. Yasmin is already up, making coffee in the small kitchen. She seems tense, distracted, and when he asks if something is wrong, she gives him a smile that does not reach her eyes and says she is just worried about the political situation, about rumors of more arrests. James, still half asleep, decides to review his consulate reports before returning them to the secure facility. He goes to his briefcase and finds the documents slightly out of order, not how he left them. It is a small thing, barely noticeable, but James has a trained eye for detail, a habit developed through years of archaeological work where the position of every artifact matters. He looks more carefully and sees something else. A faint smudge on one of the pages, as if someone handled it with slightly damp fingers. His mind begins to race, connecting observations he has been unconsciously collecting for weeks. Yasmin's increased nervousness. Her questions about his consulate work, questions that seemed casual at the time but now take on a different significance. The way she has been staying over more frequently, as if she needs to be close to his briefcase, to his documents. He does not want to believe it. Every fiber of his being rebels against the thought that the woman he loves could be using him, could be stealing classified information from his home. But he is not a fool, and he has been briefed on intelligence threats, on the ways that foreign services target Americans with access to sensitive information. He knows the tradecraft, knows that romance is one of the oldest and most effective tools in the espionage toolkit. With his heart sinking, James begins a search of the apartment. He moves quietly, methodically, checking drawers and shelves while Yasmin is in the bathroom. He finds the Minox camera in a hollowed-out book on the shelf, a book about Mesopotamian pottery that he gave her as a gift 3 months ago. The irony is almost unbearable. He stands in the bedroom, holding the camera, feeling as if the floor has dropped away beneath his feet. This is the moment when Yasmin emerges from the bathroom and sees him in the mirror, sees the camera in his hand, sees the devastation on his face. For several seconds, neither of them speaks. The apartment is silent except for the distant sounds of Damascus traffic and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Yasmin says, very quietly in English, "I can explain. Can you?" James's voice is hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Can you explain why you have a spy camera hidden in a book I gave you? Can you explain why my classified documents were moved? Can you explain which intelligence service you work for and how long you have been using me?" Yasmin's face crumbles. She takes a step toward him, then stops when she sees him flinch. "James, please, you have to understand. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to fall in love with you, so you admit it. You are a spy." She closes her eyes, and when she opens them again, there are tears on her cheeks. "I work for Egyptian intelligence. I was assigned to get close to you, to gather information about American assessments of Israeli military capabilities. but everything between us, everything we shared, that was real. The work at the excavation, the conversations, the love, all of it was real. James feels something break inside him. How much did you photograph? How much classified information did you pass to Cairo? Yasmin hesitates, and in that hesitation, James sees the full scope of the betrayal. Not just the recent documents, but months of careful intelligence gathering, months of exploiting his trust and his love to serve a foreign power. Everything, he says, answering his own question. You photographed everything I brought home. Every report, every assessment, every piece of intelligence I was stupid enough to leave where you could access it. Not everything, Yasmin says desperately. I protected you, James. I only passed along information that would not directly implicate you. I made sure Cairo understood that you were an unwitting source, that you had no idea I was collecting intelligence. I tried to keep you safe by stealing classified information from my apartment, by photographing CIA assessments of Israeli nuclear capabilities, by potentially giving Egypt and its allies information that could be used to target Israeli facilities or personnel. That is how you kept me safe. Yasmin's voice rises, passionate and anguished. You do not understand what is at stake. Israel is building nuclear weapons, James. Nuclear weapons in the heart of the Middle East, while lying to the entire world about it. Do you know what that means for the region? Do you know what it means for the Palestinians who were driven from their homes, for the Arab nations that live under the constant threat of Israeli aggression? Someone has to stand against this. Someone has to gather the intelligence that will allow us to defend ourselves. And you decided that someone was you, James says bitterly. You decided that your cause was more important than honesty, than loyalty, than everything we built together. Did you ever really love me, Yasmin? Or was that just part of the operation, just another tool in your intelligence collection toolkit? The question hangs in the air between them, and for a moment, Yasmin cannot answer. When she finally speaks, her voice is broken. I love you more than I have ever loved anyone. I love you so much that it terrifies me, because it means I have failed at the one thing I was supposed to do, which is put my mission above everything else. Every day I wake up next to you, I feel like I am being torn in half, because I cannot reconcile what I feel with what I have done. But yes, James, I love you. And I know you will never believe me now, and I know I have destroyed the only good thing in my life, but it is the truth. James wants to believe her. God help him, even now, even holding the evidence of her betrayal in his hand. He wants to believe that some part of what they shared was real. But he cannot afford to trust his feelings, not when the consequences are so severe. He thinks about the classified reports, about the intelligence on Dimona that is now in Egyptian hands, about the potential implications for Israeli security and American interests in the region. He thinks about his career, about the security clearance that will be revoked, about the investigations and interrogations that will follow if this becomes known. And he thinks about Yasmin, about the woman he thought he knew, about the impossible tangle of love and betrayal that now defines their relationship. What happens now? Yasmin asks. What are you going to do? James does not have an answer. The protocol is clear. He should immediately report the security breach to the consulate, should turn over the camera and the evidence, should cooperate fully with the inevitable investigation. Yasmin will be arrested by Syrian authorities, will likely be imprisoned or executed as a spy. The intelligence she gathered will be assessed for damage, and James himself will face serious consequences for his security violations. His career will be over, his reputation destroyed, and he will spend years wondering if he was simply a fool who let love blind him to an obvious intelligence operation. But there is another option, one that James barely allows himself to consider. He could say nothing. He could destroy the camera, could pretend this conversation never happened, could return the classified documents to the consulate and continue his life as if he never discovered the truth. Yasmin would remain free, would continue her work for Egyptian intelligence, and James would become complicit in espionage against his own country. It is an unthinkable choice, a betrayal of everything he believes in. And yet, as he looks at Yasmin's tear-stained face, as he remembers 2 years of shared discoveries and whispered promises, he finds himself actually considering it. The moment stretches out, filled with all the words they cannot say, all the futures that have just become impossible. Then there is a knock at the door. Sharp, authoritative, unmistakably official. James and Yasmin freeze, their eyes meeting in mutual terror. The knock comes again, louder this time, followed by a voice in Arabic demanding that the door be opened in the name of Syrian state security. Yasmin's face goes white. They know, she whispers. The Mukhabarat knows about me. They have been watching. James, you have to let me go. You have to let me run. If they take me, they will torture me for information about Egyptian networks, and they will implicate you as my accomplice. You have to give me a chance to escape. But James is not thinking about escape. He is thinking about the classified documents still sitting on his desk, about the Minox camera in his hand, about the fact that Syrian intelligence is about to enter his apartment and discover evidence of an espionage operation that will trigger a diplomatic crisis. He has perhaps 30 seconds to make a decision that will determine not just his fate and Yasmin's, but potentially the trajectory of American-Syrian relations and the broader balance of power in a region already teetering on the edge of war. The knocking becomes pounding. The voice outside grows more insistent, threatening to break down the door. Yasmin grabs his arm. James, please. If you ever loved me, if any of it was real, please let me go. There is a window in the bedroom that opens onto a narrow alley. I can disappear into the old city. I have contacts who can get me out of Damascus, but you have to decide now. James looks at her, this woman who has been his lover and his betrayer, his partner in archaeological discovery, and his handler's intelligence asset. He thinks about justice and mercy, about duty and love, about all the impossible choices that come from living in a world where nothing is simple, and every decision carries consequences that ripple out in ways no one can predict. Then he makes his choice. He takes Yasmin's hand and pulls her toward the bedroom, toward the window that opens onto the alley and the maze of the old city beyond. He does not know if he is saving her or damning himself. He does not know if this is an act of love or an act of treason. All he knows is that he cannot stand in this apartment and watch Syrian security forces take her away to torture and execution. He cannot be the instrument of her destruction, even if she has been the instrument of his betrayal. Yasmin climbs through the window, pausing for one last moment on the sill. She looks back at him, and in her eyes he sees gratitude and sorrow and a love that he will never be sure was real. "I am sorry," she says, "for everything." "I am sorry too," James replies. Then she is gone, disappearing into the Damascus morning, and James turns to face the door as it splinters open and Syrian security forces pour into the apartment. The aftermath unfolds with the grim inevitability of a Greek tragedy. James is detained for questioning, held in a Syrian security facility for 3 days while investigators try to determine his role in Yasmin's espionage operation. The American consulate intervenes, applying diplomatic pressure, and James is eventually released, though not before he has been thoroughly interrogated about his relationship with Yasmin and his handling of classified materials. The consulate conducts its own investigation and concludes that James was a victim of a honey trap operation, that he was manipulated by a skilled intelligence agent, and showed poor judgment in bringing classified documents home, but did not knowingly participate in espionage. His security clearance is revoked, his consulting relationship with the State Department is terminated, and he is strongly encouraged to leave Syria immediately. His archaeological career, built over a decade of study and fieldwork, is effectively over. No institution wants to employ someone who has been compromised by foreign intelligence, even if he was technically a victim rather than a perpetrator. Yasmin vanishes. Despite extensive efforts by both Syrian and American intelligence services, she is never found. There are rumors that she made it to Egypt, that she was extracted by her handlers and given a new identity. Other reports suggest she was killed trying to cross the border, that her body lies in an unmarked grave somewhere in the desert. James will spend the rest of his life not knowing, carrying the weight of that uncertainty like a stone in his chest. The intelligence she gathered makes its way to Cairo, and from there to other Arab capitals. The information about Dimona contributes to a growing Arab conviction that Israel must be confronted militarily before its nuclear program becomes operational. It is one thread among many that leads to the escalating tensions of the mid-1960s, to the miscalculations and misperceptions that will explode into the Six-Day War of June 1967, a conflict that will reshape the Middle East and whose consequences continue to reverberate today. James returns to the United States a broken man. He takes a teaching position at a small college in New England, far from the centers of archaeological research, far from the deserts and ancient cities that once defined his life. He never marries. He never returns to the Middle East. He spends his days teaching introductory courses to undergraduates who have no idea that their mild-mannered professor was once at the center of an intelligence operation that helped push a region toward war. At night, alone in his small apartment, he sometimes takes out a photograph of Yasmin, taken at the Palmyra excavation in the early days of their relationship. In the photo, she is laughing, her face lit with genuine joy, and James stares at that image trying to determine what was real and what was performance, trying to separate the woman he loved from the agent who betrayed him. He never finds an answer. In the end, the story of James Whitmore and Yasmin Al-Rashid is a story about the human cost of the Cold War's shadow conflicts, about the way geopolitical struggles between superpowers and regional powers played out in the lives of individuals caught between competing loyalties. It is a story about love and betrayal, about the impossibility of separating personal relationships from political contexts in a world where everything is connected and every choice has consequences. And it is a story that remains largely unknown, buried in classified files and fading memories, one of thousands of small tragedies that unfolded in the margins of the great power competition that defined the second half of the 20th century. The Dimona facility continued its work, eventually producing the nuclear weapons that made Israel the Middle East's only nuclear power, a fact that remains officially unacknowledged but universally understood. The intelligence that Yasmin gathered and passed to Egyptian handlers became part of the calculations that led Arab leaders to believe they could confront Israel militarily, a belief that proved catastrophically wrong in June 1967, when Israeli forces achieved a stunning victory in just 6 days. The war's outcome, the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula, created the basic contours of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that persists to this day. And somewhere in that chain of events, in that complex web of intelligence assessments and military planning and political decisions, are the photographs that Yasmin took in a Damascus apartment in the summer of 1963, stolen moments captured on film, while the man she may or may not have loved slept in the next room. History is made of such moments, of small betrayals and impossible choices, of love and duty colliding in ways that send ripples across decades and continents. James Whitmore understood this in the end. In his final years, teaching at that small New England college, he would sometimes tell his students that history is not just about great leaders and decisive battles, but about ordinary people making extraordinary choices under impossible circumstances. He never told them that he was speaking from experience, that he had once stood in a Damascus apartment holding evidence of espionage, and had to choose between duty and mercy, between justice and love. He never told them about the woman who disappeared into the old city, carrying with her secrets that would help shape a war, carrying with her a piece of his heart that he never recovered. Some stories, he believed, were too painful to share, too complicated to reduce to lessons for undergraduates. Some stories could only be carried in silence, borne as private burdens by those who lived them. And so the story of James and Yasmin remained untold, another secret buried in the vast archive of Cold War espionage, another tragedy hidden in the shadows of history, waiting for someone to discover it and wonder what it meant, what it revealed about the human capacity for both love and betrayal, for both sacrifice and survival. The Damascus apartment was eventually rented to someone else. The window through which Yasmin escaped was repaired, and life in the ancient city continued, as it had for thousands of years, layering new stories over old, new betrayals over ancient ones, new loves over the ruins of those that came before.